The ivory envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I could bring myself to open it. Gold-embossed lettering spelling out Mr. and Mrs. Ryan Foster, like a cruel reminder of what was supposed to be. I already knew what it contained. My sister Natalie's wedding invitation, but something in me couldn't bear to make it official by breaking the seal. When I finally did, the handwritten note inside stung worse than the formal invitation itself. Olivia, I've reserved you a special place. It would mean everything to have you there. Special place. If only I'd known then what those words would come to mean. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra, special for you. Family has always been complicated for me. In the Mitchell household, there were unspoken hierarchies, and my sister Natalie had always been at the top. The golden child. The perfect one. Growing up in our craftsman home in Portland's Eastmoreland neighborhood, I learned early that Natalie's accomplishments somehow always outshined mine. Her dance recitals drew more applause than my academic awards. Her homecoming photos occupied the largest frames in our living room, while my college graduation picture sat on a side table, often collecting dust. But I told myself that was all. Behind us. At 32, I had built a life that felt like my own. I had my marketing career at Horizon Media, a downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows that captured Portland's moody skies, and a marriage I thought was solid. Ryan and I had been together for 7 years, married for 4. He was charming, ambitious, and shared my love for quiet weekend hikes in Forest Park. We weren't perfect, but we had something real, or so I believed. When Natalie started her wedding planning business 3 years ago, it was struggling. Her aesthetic vision was impeccable, but the business side was floundering. Balance sheets in the red, vendor relationships fraying, and potential clients walking away. That's when she called me in tears one rainy Tuesday evening. "Liv, I don't know what to do." Her voice cracked through the phone. "Everything's falling apart. I've got the Wilsons threatening to sue over their disaster of a reception, and 3 cancellations this week alone." I remember looking at Ryan across our living room, his eyes meeting mine over his laptop screen. He gave me that slight head shake I'd come to recognize. Don't get involved. But this was my sister. Despite everything, despite the childhood slights and adult dismissals, she was blood. "I'll come by tomorrow," I said, already mentally rescheduling my meetings. "We'll figure it out." Ryan's sigh was audible. "Olivia, don't let her pull you in again," he said after I hung up. "You know how this goes. She takes and then somehow you end up feeling like you didn't give enough." He wasn't wrong. There was a pattern with Natalie that had defined our relationship since childhood, but I couldn't turn my back on her, not when she was genuinely struggling. "It's just a consultation," I assured him. "Some marketing advice, maybe help with her business plan. I won't get too involved." Those words would come back to haunt me. What started as a consultation turned into nights and weekends poured into Mitchell Magic weddings. I restructured her pricing tiers, created a digital marketing strategy that showcased her aesthetic in a way that actually converted to bookings, and renegotiated with vendors to repair relationships. I spent holidays editing her website instead, of baking cookies, Saturdays at bridal expos instead of on hiking trails with Ryan. "This is getting out of hand," Ryan confronted me 6 months in, when I was up at midnight creating content calendars for Natalie's social media. "When was the last time we had dinner together without your phone buzzing with her emergencies?" I rubbed my tired eyes. "She's just getting established. Once the business is stable, I'll pull back." "And what are you getting out of this? Has she even offered to pay you for basically saving her company?" The question stung because I knew the answer. Natalie hadn't offered and I hadn't asked. Instead, she'd made promises. Vague, but enticing. "Once we're really successful, I want you to come on board officially," she'd say. "We could be partners, Liv. Mitchell sisters taking the wedding world by storm. That partnership dangled like a carrot. Finally, validation. Finally, equality. Finally, standing shoulder to shoulder with my sister instead of in her shadow. And slowly, the business did turn around. Bookings increased, reviews glowed, profits materialized. Natalie's Instagram following quadrupled. Local publications featured her work. Mitchell Magic Weddings became the go-to for Portland couples wanting something beyond the ordinary. Through it all, my own life began to blur. Ryan and I fought more frequently. My work at Horizon suffered. I turned down a promotion because I couldn't take on more responsibility while moonlighting for Natalie. Friends stopped calling because I was always busy with my sister's latest crisis, but I told myself it was worth it. I told myself we were building something together. I told myself that when Natalie announced she was dating Christopher Reynolds, a prominent real estate developer who had hired her to plan his company's gala, and things quickly got serious, that I was happy for her, even as my own marriage felt increasingly distant. The night Natalie called to tell me Christopher had proposed, I was alone in my apartment. Ryan was on a business trip to Seattle, his third that month. He did it, Liv, at Silver Creek Vineyard at sunset. The ring is unbelievable. 5 carats. 5. Her excitement bubbled through the phone. And listen, I want you to be more than my maid of honor. I want you to help plan everything. Who better than the person who made Mitchell Magic what it is? It'll be our crowning achievement. I should have been thrilled. This was what I'd worked for. Recognition, partnership, my sister finally seeing my value. Instead, an unexpected hollowness opened inside me. I looked around my empty apartment, at the unwashed coffee mug Ryan had left 3 days ago, at the work laptop still open to Natalie's website, and wondered what exactly I was sacrificing, and for what. Of course, I heard myself say, I'd be honored. When Ryan returned from his trip, something was different. He was distant, checked his phone more frequently, worked later hours. I was too consumed with Natalie's wedding plans to really investigate, too exhausted from splitting myself between 2 jobs to ask the hard questions. We began to orbit each other like strangers, our conversations reduced to logistics and pleasantries. Meanwhile, Natalie's wedding consumed every free moment. She wanted Silver Creek Vineyard transformed, wanted a ceremony and reception that would cement her business as Portland's elite wedding destination. And she wanted me to make it happen, not as a paid planner, but as a sister who owed her for the opportunity to be part of Mitchell Magic. This wedding will put us on the map nationally, she insisted over coffee at Rainy Day Brew. Wedding? Blogs, magazines, everyone will want to feature it, and when they ask who was behind it all, they'll know it was you, I finished, already recognizing the familiar pattern. Natalie frowned. Well, of course my name is on the business, but I'll make sure to mention your contribution. And like I said, after the wedding, we can discuss making things more official. 3 months before the wedding, Ryan and I had our worst fight yet. I'd found receipts for dinners I hadn't been part of, charges at a hotel downtown, though he had claimed to be working late. When confronted, he turned it back on me. What did you expect, Olivia? You've been emotionally checked, out of this marriage for over a year. Everything is Natalie, Natalie, Natalie. Her business, her wedding, her needs. What about us? What about what I need? I should have pushed harder, should have demanded the truth. Instead, I retreated, wounded by the accusation, but knowing there was some truth to it. And there was. Natalie's voice in my head. We're so close, Liv. After the wedding, everything will be different. I promise. Promises. They can sound so genuine in the moment, so real. It's only in retrospect that you see how empty words can be when they come from someone who has never had to keep them. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found the messages. Ryan had left his laptop open, and a notification flashed on the screen, A name I didn't recognize, Vanessa, and words that stopped my heart. Miss you already. Last night was perfect. With shaking hands, I clicked. Hundreds of messages unfolded before me, dating back nearly 8 months. The Seattle trips, the late nights at the office, all lies. Ryan had been seeing this woman, this Vanessa Collins, while I poured myself into saving my sister's business and planning her dream wedding. When Ryan came home, I was sitting at our dining table, his laptop open in front of me. Who is she? My voice was surprisingly steady. He didn't even try to deny it. Someone who sees me. Someone who puts me first. His words cut deep. I was going to tell you after Natalie's wedding. I didn't want to ruin that for you, since it's clearly the most important thing in your life. The irony was suffocating. Here I was, sacrificing my marriage for a sister who had always seen me as secondary, while my husband sought solace in another woman's arms. I want you out, I said, surprise at my own resolve rippling through me. Tonight. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He nodded, as if he'd been expecting this, perhaps even hoping for it. I'll get a hotel. We can figure out the details later. Does Natalie know? I suddenly asked as he turned to pack a bag. Ryan paused. About Vanessa? I haven't told her, but he had the decency to look uncomfortable. She might have figured it out. We ran into her and Christopher at Riverfront Park last month. The betrayal doubled, twisted like a knife. My sister had known my husband was cheating and said nothing. All while I continued to sacrifice everything for her wedding, her business, her dreams. That night, alone in the apartment that no longer felt like home, I called Natalie. For once I needed my sister, her support, her outrage on my behalf, her shoulder to cry on. Liv, I'm in the middle of a cake tasting, she answered, irritation evident in her voice. Ryan's been cheating on me. The words tumbled out. For months, with someone named Vanessa. He's moved out. There was a pause, too long and telling. Oh my God, I'm shocked. But she wasn't. I could hear it in her voice, the careful calculation, the performance of surprise. You knew, I said flatly. You saw them together. Another pause. Listen, it wasn't my place to get involved in your marriage. And honestly, Liv, we're 2 weeks out from the biggest day of my life. I need you focused. We can deal with your divorce drama after the wedding. Divorce drama. As if my collapsing life was an inconvenience to her. Timeline. As if my pain was an unwelcome intrusion on her perfect plans. I've given up everything for you, Natalie. My time, my career advancement, my marriage. Oh, don't be dramatic, she cut me off. Your marriage issues aren't because of me. And, let's be honest, I've given you an incredible opportunity with Mitchell Magic. Most people would be grateful. In that moment, something crystallized for me. Years of being the lesser sister, months of uncompensated work, the dangling promise of partnership that never quite materialized. All of it suddenly came into focus with painful clarity. I had been used by my sister and my husband alike, and somehow I was still expected to be grateful for it. I'll see you at the wedding, I said quietly, and hung up. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of finalized details and legal consultations. During the day, I robotically checked items off Natalie's wedding to-do list. At night, I met with Daniel Winters, the divorce attorney my friend Sophie had recommended, gathering evidence of Ryan's infidelity and documenting my contributions to our shared assets. I moved through this dual reality like a ghost, hollow but determined. Sophie tried to convince me to back out of the wedding entirely. After everything, you're still going to make sure her day is perfect? She asked incredulously over drinks. Olivia, you don't owe her this. I'm not doing it for her anymore, I replied, surprising myself with the truth of it. I'm doing it to finish what I started. And then I'm done. The day before the wedding, Natalie called with last-minute changes to the seating chart. Her voice was oddly hesitant. "So, there's been a slight adjustment to the head table arrangement," she began. "Christopher's investors are coming, and we need to make room for them. I'm going to have you seated separately." "Separately? I'm your sister and maid of honor." "Yes, well, there's a lovely table in the adjacent room. You know, the one with the stone walls? The caterers will be using it as a staging area, but I've had them set up a small table in the corner. It's very intimate." The adjacent room. She meant the renovated kitchen that Silver Creek used for event prep, not even the dining room. She was putting me in the staff area. "Why?" I asked, though I already felt the answer forming like ice in my stomach. Natalie sighed, dropping the pretense. "Ryan's coming, Olivia. Christopher insisted. They play golf together, and Ryan's firm might invest in Chris's next development. I can't have you two at the same table making everyone uncomfortable with your drama." Ryan was coming, to the wedding I had planned, after destroying our marriage. "And Vanessa?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The silence confirmed what I already knew. "It's my wedding day, Liv," Natalie finally said. "I need everything perfect. You understand that better than anyone." Perfect. At any cost. Including my dignity. "I understand perfectly," I said, and this time I really did. The morning of Natalie's wedding dawned with Portland's signature autumn rain, a gentle, persistent drizzle that seemed to mirror my inner state. I dressed mechanically in the burgundy bridesmaid dress I'd helped select, applied makeup to hide the shadows under my eyes, and drove to Silver Creek Vineyard to fulfill my final obligations. The ceremony went flawlessly, each detail executed exactly as planned. I stood beside my sister as she said her vows, smiled for the photographs, distributed the hand-calligraphed place cards I'd designed at the reception. And then, as guests moved from the ceremony space to the main reception hall, I saw them. Ryan and Vanessa, her hand tucked possessively through his arm, both dressed immaculately. She was beautiful in a way that felt deliberately curated, as if she'd been designed specifically to make me feel inadequate. Ryan caught my eye across the room, had the audacity to nod in acknowledgement. Vanessa glanced my way, curiosity evident, in her perfectly made-up face. She knew who I was. She was wearing earrings I recognized, ones Ryan had given me for our anniversary, claimed to have lost when I couldn't find them months ago. I watched as an usher guided them to their seats, at the main table, just 3 places down from where the bride and groom would sit. The table I had decorated with hand-selected flowers and custom linens. The table where I, as sister of the bride, should have been seated. Instead, a different usher approached me. "Ms. Mitchell? If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your seat." He led me away from the glittering reception hall, through a service door, and into the stone-walled kitchen area. Staff bustled about, carrying trays and arranging desserts. In the far corner, partially hidden behind a rolling cart of glassware, was a small table with a single place setting. "Can I get you anything?" the usher asked, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. I looked around at the service staff, at the industrial kitchen equipment, at the single chair facing the wall, and something inside me finally broke free. "No," I said, picking up my clutch. "I don't think you can." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, past the surprised usher, through the service corridor, and back into the reception hall. Conversations hushed as I moved purposefully through. The crowd, bridesmaid dress swishing against the tables until I reached the head table. Ryan saw me coming, his expression shifting from shock to alarm. Vanessa tensed beside him. But I wasn't there for them. Not yet. I stopped directly in front of Natalie, who was accepting congratulations from a group of guests. "Olivia?" she hissed through her camera-ready smile. "What are you doing? Your seat is in the kitchen," I finished for her. Next to the dishwasher. I know. Christopher looked between us, confusion evident on his face. There must be some mistake. Natalie, your sister should be at our table. Natalie's smile tightened. It's complicated, honey. We discussed this. Did you discuss that I've spent the last 18 months building her business for free? That I created every element of this wedding from scratch? That I did all of this while my husband was cheating on me with that woman right there? I pointed directly at Vanessa, who had the grace to blush. And your wife knew about it and said nothing? The surrounding guests fell silent. Christopher's expression hardened as he turned to Natalie. You knew about Ryan and Vanessa? I almost felt sorry for him then, recognizing the look of someone realizing they'd married a person capable of extraordinary selfishness. Natalie grabbed my arm, fingernails digging in. You're ruining everything. After all I've done for you. That broke something loose in me, a laugh that bordered on hysterical. What exactly have you done for me, Natalie? Used my skills? Taken credit for my work? Seated me in the kitchen while welcoming my husband's mistress to your table? I gently removed her hand from my arm. I've spent my entire life waiting for scraps of approval from you, waiting to be seen as an equal. I thought if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, eventually you'd recognize my worth. I turned to address the silent onlookers, including Ryan and Vanessa. But I see now that some people are incapable of recognizing the value of what's right in front of them. They're too consumed with appearances, with status, with their own desires. Liv, you're making a scene, Ryan interjected, rising from his seat. This isn't the place. Isn't it? I asked, meeting his gaze directly. Where better to expose the truth than surrounded by all these witnesses? Where better to reclaim my dignity than at the event I created while you both betrayed me? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, the earrings, my earrings, catching the light. Nice earrings, I noted calmly. They were a gift from my husband on our 3rd anniversary. I suppose they're yours now, along with whatever else of mine you felt entitled to take. I hadn't planned what came next. It wasn't a calculated move or a rehearsed speech. It was simply the truth, breaking free after being buried for too long. I'm done, I said, addressing both Natalie and Ryan. Done being the reliable one who gets taken for granted. Done sacrificing my happiness for people who wouldn't do the same for me. Done accepting less than I deserve. I removed the bridesmaid's bracelet Natalie had given us all that morning. I wish you a long and happy marriage, Natalie. I truly do. And I hope that someday you learn that how you treat people matters more than how your Instagram photos look. I placed the bracelet on the table and turned to leave, but Christopher's voice stopped me. Wait, he said, standing up. Olivia's right. This is wrong. He turned to Natalie. You told me she preferred to sit separately because of her divorce situation. You didn't tell me you were hiding her in the kitchen while her husband and while they sat at our table. Natalie's perfect composure finally cracked. It's my wedding day. Everything needs to be perfect. Ryan's connections are important for your business, and I couldn't have them not come just because Olivia can't handle seeing them together. The casual cruelty of it silenced the room. Even those who didn't know the full story could recognize the heartlessness in her words. Christopher looked at me, then back at his new wife, seeing her perhaps for the first time. Perfection isn't worth this, he said quietly. Not at this price. He gestured to an empty chair beside him. Olivia, please, join us, as you should have from the beginning. It was a gesture of kindness, of recognition that I hadn't expected. For a moment, I was tempted to accept, to take the rightful place that had been denied me, to sit tall beside my sister and across from my husband and his mistress, to force them all to acknowledge my presence. But something deeper had shifted within me. I didn't need their validation anymore. Thank you, Christopher, I said sincerely. but I think I've outgrown this table." With that, I walked away, not toward the kitchen where I'd been banished, but through the main doors and out into the rainy evening. Behind me, conversations erupted, voices raised in question and judgment. But ahead of me was something else entirely. The first night of a life reclaimed. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. An unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Olivia Mitchell?" A woman's voice, professional and crisp. "This is Elaine Gardner from Pinnacle Events. I was at your sister's wedding just now. I'm a colleague of Christopher's. What I just witnessed was illuminating. But what really caught my attention was learning that you're the actual creative force behind Mitchell Magic Weddings." I leaned against my car, rain dampening my hair. I contributed significantly, yes. "Well, I'm looking for someone with exactly your talents for our West Coast expansion. Someone who understands both the creative and business sides of event planning. Would you be interested in discussing a position? One where your name would be on the door, not hidden in the kitchen?" The rain seemed to lighten, a break in the clouds allowing a single beam of evening sunlight to gild the vineyard's autumn foliage. "I would be very interested in that conversation," I replied, feeling the first genuine smile in weeks spread across my face. As I drove away from Silver Creek Vineyard, leaving behind the gilded cage I'd helped build, I felt not regret, but relief. Some tables aren't worth sitting at, no matter how beautifully they're decorated. Some relationships aren't worth saving, no matter how much history they hold. Sometimes, the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away from what diminishes her and toward what recognizes her true value. Even if that means walking through the rain alone, head held high, toward a future she designs for herself. The morning after Natalie's wedding, I woke up in my downtown apartment with a strange sense of lightness. Rain tapped against my windows, but for once, the gray Portland sky didn't mirror my mood. I had walked away, not just from a humiliating seating arrangement, but from years of diminishing myself to please others. My phone had accumulated dozens of missed calls and messages overnight. Natalie, Ryan, even Christopher. I ignored them all, making coffee and watching the city wake up through rain-streaked glass. The only message I responded to was from Elaine Gardner at Pinnacle Events, confirming our meeting for the following day. There was something powerful about focusing solely on my future rather than untangling the mess of my past. Sophie called while I was on my second cup of coffee. "You're a legend," she said without preamble. "The whole wedding is talking about nothing else. Olivia Mitchell finally stood up for herself, and it was glorious." I laughed despite myself. "I'm sure Natalie doesn't see it that way." "Who cares? She seated you in the kitchen, Liv, while welcoming your cheating husband and his girlfriend to the main table. There's no coming back from that level of awful." She was right, of course. Some betrayals are so fundamental that they change everything that comes after. The strange thing was, I felt more clarity than anger. The fog I'd been living in had finally lifted. "I have a job interview tomorrow," I told her. "With Pinnacle Events." "The luxury planning company? That's huge." "It might be nothing," I cautioned. "Elaine Gardner approached me after everything happened. She might just feel sorry for me." "Or," Sophie countered, "she might recognize talent when she sees it. Everything beautiful about that wedding came from you, not Natalie. Anyone in the industry would know that." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Fresh Start. In it, I began listing everything I needed to do to disentangle my life from Natalie's business and from my marriage. The document quickly filled with action items: lawyer appointments, portfolio compilation, apartment hunting, asset division. Each item represented a step toward independence. When Monday morning arrived, I dressed in a charcoal blazer and silk blouse that had once felt like battle armor for big marketing presentations. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened a simple silver necklace. Not from fear, but from anticipation. For the first time in too long, I was stepping toward something rather than running from something. Pinnacle Events occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise with views of the Willamette River. The receptionist smiled warmly as I gave my name, as if I were expected and welcome. Such a contrast to how I'd felt at my sister's wedding. Just 2 days earlier. Elaine Gardner emerged from a conference room, elegant in a tailored suit, her silver hair cut in a precise bob. "Olivia," she greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming in so quickly." "Thank you for reaching out," I replied, following her through an open workspace filled with stylish professionals focused on their monitors and mood boards. Her office featured floor-to-ceiling windows and walls adorned with framed magazine covers and event photographs. "Please, sit," she gestured to a sleek chair across from her desk. "I imagine the past few days have been challenging." I nodded, unsure how much personal information to share in a professional setting. "I'll be direct," Elaine continued, saving me from the decision. "What I witnessed at Silver Creek was unprofessional and unkind, but it also revealed something important. You're the creative force behind Mitchell Magic Weddings, aren't you?" "I've contributed significantly to the business over the past 18 months, I confirmed carefully. "I've been watching Mitchell Magic's rise with interest," Elaine said, pulling up their website on her tablet. "The aesthetic transformation, the marketing approach, the vendor relationships. That was all you, wasn't it?" "Yes," I admitted, feeling a surprising relief in claiming my work aloud. "Natalie has a good eye for design, but the business structure, digital strategy, and client acquisition systems were my contribution. And were you compensated fairly for this work?" My silence answered for me. Elaine nodded. "As I suspected, Olivia, talent like yours shouldn't be hidden. Certainly not in kitchens." She smiled slightly at her own reference. "Pinnacle is expanding our West Coast presence, focusing on high-end corporate events and luxury weddings. We need someone to head our Portland office, someone with vision, business acumen, and creative instincts." My heart began to race. This wasn't just a job offer. This was an opportunity to step fully into my capabilities. The position would involve complete creative control of our Portland operations, building a team, establishing our brand in the local market, and managing key client relationships, she continued. "The compensation package is competitive, with profit sharing after the first year." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a formal offer letter with a salary figure that made my eyes widen. "This is generous," I managed, trying to maintain professional composure. "It's market rate for executive talent," Elaine corrected gently. "Something tells me you've been undervaluing yourself for some time, Olivia." There was no judgment in her tone, only recognition, as if she too had once stood where I was, learning. To claim her worth. "I'd need 2 weeks to consider and wrap up some personal matters," I said, already mentally calculating how quickly I could extract myself from Mitchell Magic without burning everything to the ground. Even after everything, some part of me still wanted to be fair to my sister. "Take the time you need," Elaine agreed. "But I should mention that this position has attracted significant interest. I'm offering it to you first because I believe you're the right fit, but I can't hold it indefinitely." I understood the gentle pressure. This wasn't just a courtesy offer. It was a real opportunity that could vanish if I hesitated too long. "I'll have my decision to you by next Monday," I promised. As I rode the elevator down from Pinnacle's offices, the reality of what was happening finally hit me. I had walked away from my sister's wedding 2 days ago, and now I was being offered a position that would put me in direct competition with her business. Taking this job wouldn't just be a career move. It would be the final severing of whatever remained between Natalie and me. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and gleaming in unexpected sunshine. I decided to walk for a while, needing to clear my head before returning home. My path took me along the river, past couples holding hands and office workers enjoying late lunches on park benches. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Ryan again. After ignoring his calls all weekend, I finally answered. "Olivia?" He sounded relieved. "Finally, we need to talk about what happened." "Do we?" I asked, continuing my walk. "I think everything was said quite clearly at the wedding." "That's not fair. You humiliated Vanessa and me in front of everyone. Christopher's investors were there. Do you have any idea how this could affect my business relationships?" The audacity was almost impressive. "You humiliated me by cheating for 8 months, wearing wedding rings while building a relationship with another woman, and then showing up with her to my sister's wedding, which I planned, by the way. So no, Ryan, I don't particularly care about your business relationships right now." "I never meant to hurt you," he said, his voice softening. "Things just happened with Vanessa. And then they kept happening. You were so wrapped up in Natalie's business you barely noticed me anymore." "Don't you dare blame me for your choices," I said, stopping to face the river, watching a boat cut through the water. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have asked for a divorce before starting a relationship with someone else. Those were all options that didn't involve betrayal." "You're right," he admitted after a long pause. "I handled it badly. All of it. But we need to figure out next steps like adults. The apartment, our accounts, the furniture. I've already spoken with a lawyer," I cut in. "You'll be hearing from them this week with proposed terms for our separation. Since Oregon is a no-fault state and we've been married less than 10 years with no children, it should be straightforward." The silence on the other end suggested he hadn't expected me to be so organized, so decisive. He'd assumed, perhaps, that I would fall apart without him or Natalie to orbit around. "Olivia, I'm sorry." "For what it's worth." "It's not worth much," I replied honestly. "But I accept your apology. Now I need to move on." After hanging up, I continued walking, feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and liberation. Endings are always painful, even when necessary. But with every step, I was walking away from relationships that diminished me and towards something that might allow me to finally flourish. My phone rang again almost immediately. Natalie. I hesitated but decided to rip off this bandage as well. "How could you?" she demanded before I could even speak. "Christopher barely spoke to me for the rest of the reception. His family thinks I'm some kind of monster. The wedding video is ruined because everyone was whispering about the scene you caused." I sat down on a bench overlooking the water. "Hello to you too, Natalie. This isn't funny, Olivia. You deliberately sabotaged the most important day of my life because you couldn't handle seeing Ryan with someone else. It was childish and selfish." "Was it selfish to seat your sister in the kitchen while welcoming her husband's mistress to your table?" I asked calmly. "Was it childish to use my skills for 18 months without compensation or recognition? Tell me, Natalie, when exactly did I become less valuable to you than Ryan's business connections?" "You're twisting everything," she insisted. The seating arrangement wasn't ideal, but it was the best solution for a complicated situation. "No, the best solution would have been not inviting the man who betrayed your sister, especially when your sister planned your entire wedding." Christopher insisted. "Ryan's firm is considering investing in his next development. These relationships are important for our future." There it was again, the casual prioritization of her needs above everything else. Even now, she couldn't see how fundamentally wrong her choices had been. "I've been offered a position at Pinnacle Events," I said, changing tack. "I'm considering accepting it." The silence was so complete, I wondered if the call had dropped. "Pinnacle," she finally managed, her voice smaller. "Our biggest competitor? After everything I've done for you?" I almost laughed. "What exactly have you done for me, Natalie? Name one thing that wasn't ultimately about what you needed. She couldn't answer. I'm not taking the job to hurt you, I continued more gently. I'm taking it because it's a good opportunity for me. Because they value my work enough to pay me properly for it. Because they see me as an asset, not an accessory. You wouldn't even have experience in this industry if I hadn't brought you into my business, she countered, anger returning. Everything you know about events you learned from me. This time I did laugh. Is that really what you believe? That you taught me marketing, client management, vendor negotiations, digital strategy, and financial planning? Natalie, I brought those skills to your business. I'm the reason Mitchell Magic survived its first year. If you take that job, we're done, she said, her voice tight with emotion. As sisters, as family, everything. The ultimatum hung between us, heavy with decades of complicated history. Once, those words would have devastated me, would have sent me scrambling to make amends regardless of who was at fault. Now, they simply clarified what I already knew. I think we were done the moment you decided I belonged in the kitchen while Ryan and Vanessa belonged at your table, I said quietly. I love you, Natalie. I always will. But I can't keep diminishing myself to make room for your life. After hanging up, I sat watching the river for a long time, tears finally coming now that I was alone. Not for the loss of my marriage, that had been dying by inches for months, but for the sister relationship I had always hoped would someday transform into true friendship and mutual respect. Some losses you grieve even when they're necessary. Some bonds remain tender even after they're broken. By the time I returned to my apartment, the sky had darkened again, Portland's brief sunshine swallowed by its more familiar clouds. I had 3 voice messages, one from Daniel Winters, my lawyer, confirming our appointment for the next day, one from my Aunt Patricia expressing concern after hearing about the wedding from other relatives, and, surprisingly, one from Christopher Reynolds. Olivia, it's Christopher. His voice sounded strained. I wanted to apologize for what happened at the wedding. I had no idea you'd been seated in the kitchen, or that Ryan and that they would be at our table. I should have been more aware of the arrangements. What Natalie did wasn't right, and I've told her as much. If there's anything I can do to make amends, please let me know. I appreciated his gesture, even knowing it likely created tension in his brand new marriage. At least someone in that relationship recognized the wrongness of what had happened. The next morning, I met with Daniel Winters to discuss my divorce proceedings. His office was warm and unpretentious, walls lined with legal books and framed family photos rather than the pretentious art I'd expected. Based on what you've shared, this should be relatively straightforward, he said after reviewing my situation. No children, relatively short marriage, both parties employed. The main complexities will be the apartment and any shared investments. Ryan can have the apartment, I said decisively. I'm ready for a fresh start anyway. Daniel nodded, making notes. And regarding Mitchell Magic weddings, you mentioned significant uncompensated work for your sister's company. Do you want to pursue compensation for that? The question gave me pause. Legally, I might have a claim for the value I'd contributed to Natalie's business, but pursuing it would mean prolonging a connection I was trying to sever cleanly. No, I decided. I want a complete break. Besides, I've been offered a position with Pinnacle Events that would make any compensation from Mitchell Magic seem insignificant. Daniel looked up, impressed. That's quite a step up. Congratulations. I haven't accepted yet, but I'm leaning that way. May I offer some personal advice? He asked, setting down his pen. When I nodded, he continued. In my years practicing family law, I've seen how relationships can become unbalanced, one person giving constantly while the other takes. Whether it's marriages or siblings or parents and children, the pattern is remarkably consistent. The people who recover best from these situations are those who recognize their own worth and set clear boundaries going forward. His words resonated deeply. How many relationships in my life had followed that same unbalanced pattern? How often had I measured my value by what I could give others, rather than what I deserved to receive? I'm learning that lesson rather late, I admitted. Better late than never, he replied with a kind smile. And from my perspective, you're handling this all with remarkable grace. Grace wasn't exactly how I'd describe my public confrontation at Natalie's wedding, but I appreciated the sentiment nonetheless. As I left the lawyer's office, I felt another piece of my old life being properly addressed and set aside. Ryan would receive divorce papers by the end of the week. Our shared accounts would be divided equitably. The apartment that had once represented our future together would go to him, while I would take certain meaningful items and the freedom to start over. That afternoon, I visited a potential new apartment in the Pearl District. A bright, airy space with hardwood floors and large windows. It cost more than I would have considered while working for free at Mitchell Magic, but with the Pinnacle offer, it was comfortably within my budget. I'll take it, I told the leasing agent after the tour. When can I move in? The current tenant leaves at the end of the month, she replied. So, 3 weeks from now. Is that timeline workable? For you? 3 weeks to pack up my old life and prepare for the new one. It felt simultaneously too long and not nearly enough time. That's perfect, I assured her, signing the preliminary paperwork. Outside, I called Elaine Gardner at Pinnacle. I'd like to accept your offer, I said when she answered, if it's still available. Wonderful news, she replied warmly. We'll draft the final contract immediately. When can you start? 3 weeks, I said, looking up at my soon-to-be new home. I'm in the process of restructuring my life. Understood, Elaine said, her tone suggesting she caught my meaning perfectly. Take the time you need to tie up loose ends. We'll be ready when you are. That evening, as I began the process of sorting through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind, my Aunt Patricia called. Olivia, how are you holding up? She asked without preamble. I've been worried sick since I heard what happened. Aunt Patricia had always been different from the rest of the Mitchell family. Warmer, more straightforward, less concerned with appearances. She was my father's younger sister, and while she shared the Mitchell features, she had none of the Mitchell pretensions. I'm okay, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Actually, I'm better than okay. I've accepted a new job, found a new apartment, and filed for divorce, all in the past 3 days. My God, she breathed. You're not wasting any time. No point dragging it out. Once you see things clearly, you can't unsee them. And, Natalie, have you spoken with her? I sank onto my couch, suddenly tired. Briefly, she's angry. She thinks I ruined her wedding by refusing to sit quietly in the kitchen while Ryan and his girlfriend enjoyed the reception. Patricia's outrage was immediate and validating. She seated you in the kitchen, her own sister, the one who planned her entire wedding, while your cheating husband and his tramp sat at the main table? Despite everything, I laughed at her indignation. That about sums it up. Well, she huffed. I always knew Natalie took after your mother's side of the family, all surface, no substance. But this exceeds even my low expectations. She's still my sister, I said softly. Blood doesn't excuse cruelty, Olivia, and it certainly doesn't require you to accept it. She paused. I'm proud of you, you know, for standing up for yourself. It's about time someone in this family valued you properly. Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. How long had I been waiting to hear something like that from my own parents? From Natalie? Thank you, I managed. That means a lot. Now, Patricia continued briskly, I'm coming over this weekend to help you pack. No arguments. I've got boxes from when Jeremy went to college last year, and I make an excellent sorting companion. Plus, I know exactly which family heirlooms you should take before anyone can argue about it. I smiled, grateful for her practical affection. I'd like that very much. The week continued in a blur of productivity. Each day, I tied up another loose end from my old life while laying groundwork for my new one. I met with Ryan briefly to discuss the division of our household items, a tense but necessary conversation conducted with the detached politeness of near strangers. I visited the Horizon Media office to turn in my resignation, explaining my need for a fresh start without going into painful details. My colleagues were supportive, having noticed my gradual withdrawal as more of my time went to Mitchell Magic. My supervisor, David, even offered a counter-proposal to keep me. We could match the Pinnacle offer, he suggested. You've been an asset to this team, Olivia. We don't want to lose you. His offer was tempting, the familiar comfort of a role I knew well, colleagues I respected. But it would mean staying in the same circles, potentially running into Ryan at industry events, remaining adjacent to Natalie's world. I appreciate that more than I can say, I told him sincerely. But I need a clean break. This isn't just about compensation. It's about building something completely new. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Their gain is our loss. But I respect your decision. By Friday afternoon, I had systematically dismantled much of what had defined my life just 1 week earlier. My marriage was ending. My family relationships were strained or severed. My job was transitioning. Even my living space would soon change. Yet rather than feeling unmoored, I felt lighter with each tie cut. It was as if I'd been carrying these connections like anchors, mistaking their weight for stability when they had actually been holding me in place, preventing me from moving forward. That evening, Sophie insisted on taking me out to celebrate my new job. We met at a small wine bar downtown, tucked away from the usual Friday crowds. To Olivia Mitchell, she toasted, raising her glass of Pinot Noir, who finally stopped setting herself on fire to keep other people warm. I clinked, my glass against hers. I should have done it years ago. Better late than never, Sophie said, echoing Daniel Winter's sentiment from earlier in the week. And honestly, Liv, the way you did it was pretty spectacular. I mean, walking out of that kitchen and confronting them all in front of Christopher's investors? Legendary. I winced slightly. I didn't plan it that way. Something just broke loose in me when I saw that little table tucked behind the catering carts. That breaking loose was long overdue, Sophie insisted. And now look at you. New job, new apartment, new life. All because you finally put yourself first. It's not that simple, I admitted, swirling the wine in my glass. I still miss them sometimes. Ryan, Natalie, the life I thought we had. Is that crazy? To miss people who treated you so poorly? Sophie's expression softened. It's not crazy. It's human. You loved them. You believed in those relationships. Mourning their loss doesn't mean you want them back. Her insight struck home. That was exactly it. I was grieving not because I wanted to return to those relationships, but because I was finally accepting that they had never been what I thought they were. So what's next for the new and improved Olivia Mitchell? Sophie asked, skillfully shifting to a lighter topic. I smiled, allowing myself to look forward rather than back. 3 weeks from now, I start at Pinnacle. I move into my new apartment. I begin building the life I want, not the one that's expected of me. And dating? When does that come back on the table? I laughed, shaking my head. Not for a long while. I need to figure out who I am without orbiting around someone else first. Fair enough, Sophie conceded. Though when you're ready, I know at least 3 guys who'd line up for the chance. The next morning, Aunt Patricia arrived as promised. Her station wagon packed with empty boxes and packing supplies. She swept into my apartment like a benevolent whirlwind, immediately assessing what needed to be done. "Bedrooms first," she declared. "They're always the most emotional. Better to tackle them while we're fresh." She was right. Sorting through the closet I had shared with Ryan unearthed memories with each item. The dress I'd worn when he proposed, the tie I'd given him for our first anniversary, photos from happier times. Patricia worked beside me, offering neither judgment nor false cheerfulness, just quiet support as I decided what to keep and what to let go. By mid-afternoon, we had made significant progress. The bedroom was mostly packed, with clear designations for what would come with me to the new apartment, what would stay for Ryan, and what would be donated or discarded. "Break time," Patricia announced, heading to the kitchen to make tea. I followed, grateful for the respite. As we sat at the kitchen counter with steaming mugs, Patricia studied me thoughtfully. "You know, I always worried about you and Natalie." "What do you mean?" I asked, blowing on my tea. "The dynamic between you. Even when you were little girls, there was this imbalance. Natalie took, and you gave. Your parents encouraged it, though I doubt they realized what they were doing." I'd never heard anyone in the family acknowledge this pattern so directly before. "Why didn't you say anything?" Patricia sighed. "I tried, in my way. I made sure to praise your achievements, to spend one-on-one time with you. But it wasn't my place to criticize your parents' approach directly. Besides, would you have believed me then? Sometimes these patterns aren't visible until you're ready to see them." She was right. Until recently, I'd interpreted my role as the supportive sister, the reliable daughter, as a virtue rather than a problem. I'd convinced myself that my constant giving was strength, not exploitation. "I'm seeing things clearly now," I told her. "Maybe too clearly." "Clarity can be painful," Patricia agreed, "but it's necessary for growth. And Olivia, you're finally growing into who you were always meant to be, someone who knows her own worth." As the afternoon wore on, we tackled the living room and kitchen, sorting through the shared artifacts of my marriage. Each decision became easier than the last, as if the act of choosing what to keep and what to leave behind was strengthening, a muscle I'd rarely used before. By evening, much of the apartment was organized into labeled boxes. There would be more to do in the coming weeks, but the process had begun, the methodical dismantling of one life to make space for another. As Patricia prepared to leave, she handed me a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I brought this for your new place," she said, "a housewarming gift of sorts." I unwrapped it carefully to find a beautiful hand-painted ceramic plate. "It's lovely," I said, admiring the intricate blue pattern. "It's more than just a plate," Patricia explained. "It was your grandmother's, my mother's. She always said it was too pretty to use for everyday meals, so she kept it displayed on a shelf. After she died, I realized what a waste that was, saving beautiful things instead of enjoying them." She took my hand, her expression earnest. "Don't save your best self for special occasions, Olivia. Don't keep your talents on a shelf. Use everything you have every day. That's how you honor what you've been given." I hugged her tightly, this aunt who had always seen me more clearly than anyone else in my family. "Thank you for everything." After she left, I stood in my half-packed apartment, the ceramic plate cradled in my hands. It felt like a talisman, of sorts, a physical reminder of the lesson I was finally learning, that value isn't determined by what others see in you, but by what you know exists within yourself. And what existed within me was worth far more than I had ever allowed myself to believe. The day I signed my contract with Pinnacle Events felt like crossing a threshold. Elaine's office was flooded with afternoon light, turning the signing into something ceremonial. As I wrote my name on the final page, Elaine handed me a business card, creamy white stock with embossed silver lettering, Olivia Mitchell, Executive Director, Portland Division. "It's official," she said, a note of genuine pleasure in her voice. "Welcome to Pinnacle." I ran my thumb over the raised letters of my name and title. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "This isn't charity, Olivia. It's strategic recruitment. Your work speaks for itself." She rose from behind her desk. "Let me introduce you to some of the team members you'll be working with." We toured the office, meeting designers, coordinators, and administrative staff who would form the core of my Portland team. Each greeted me with interest rather than the skepticism I'd feared. No one mentioned the wedding incident, though I suspected. Most knew about it through industry gossip. Marcus Chen, Pinnacle's lead designer, showed particular enthusiasm. "I've been following Mitchell Magic's aesthetic evolution for months," he admitted as we discussed potential projects. "The shift from basic rustic chic to that sophisticated botanical minimalism was brilliant. That was your influence, wasn't it?" I nodded, surprised and touched that my work had been recognized independently of Natalie's name. I wanted to create something distinctive in the Portland market, elegant, but not stuffy, modern but still organic. "Well, it worked. I've been shamelessly stealing ideas from your Instagram for my mood boards." He grinned, unembarrassed. "Now I get to work with the source directly." By the time I left Pinnacle that afternoon, I had a start date, an office, with a view of Mint Hood on clear days, and a tentative first client meeting scheduled for my second week. Reality was aligning with possibility faster than I'd anticipated. As I walked to my car, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with a Portland area code. "Olivia Mitchell?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes, speaking. This is Jennifer Kapoor from Portland Monthly. I'm working on a feature about women entrepreneurs in the wedding industry, and your name keeps coming up in my research." I froze halfway to my car. "My name?" "Yes. You were the marketing director for Mitchell Magic Weddings, correct? Before accepting a position with Pinnacle Events?" How did she know that already? I hadn't even announced my new role publicly. Yes, that's correct. Although I wasn't officially the marketing director. I helped my sister with her business in an unofficial capacity. "That's actually what interests me," Jennifer continued. "I've heard from several sources that you were essentially running Mitchell Magic behind the scenes, creating their distinctive visual identity, building their client base, even handling negotiations with vendors. Yet you received no official recognition." My pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of publicity that would humiliate Natalie and potentially damage her business. Part of me, the part still raw from her betrayal, felt a flicker of vindictive satisfaction. But another part hesitated. "Ms. Kapoor, I appreciate your interest, but I'm not comfortable discussing the internal workings of my sister's business. That chapter of my life is closed." "I understand," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But wouldn't you say this pattern is endemic in female-owned businesses? Women like your sister taking credit for other women's work? It seems relevant to our readers." The question was expertly crafted to appeal to my sense of justice, to the very real anger I still felt. But answering it would mean using that anger as a weapon against Natalie, crossing a line I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. "What happened between my sister and me is personal," I said finally. "My focus now is on my role at Pinnacle, where I'll have the opportunity to build something with my own name attached to it. That's the story I'm interested in telling." Jennifer paused, clearly recalculating. "Fair enough. Would you be willing to be interviewed about your new position instead? Rising from the kitchen to the corner office, so to speak?" I winced at the direct reference to the wedding incident. So that detail had made it into industry gossip as well. "I'd prefer to focus on the future rather than the past," I replied carefully. "I'd be happy to discuss Pinnacle's vision for the Portland market and my role in shaping it, but not in a way that centers on personal drama." Jennifer agreed to these terms, and we scheduled an interview for the following week. As I hung up, I realized I'd just navigated my first reel. That's the temptation to use my story as ammunition against Natalie. The fact that I'd chosen restraint felt significant, a sign that I was healing rather than merely reacting. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a small wine bar I'd always wanted to try but had never visited because Ryan disliked pretentious, small plates. The irony wasn't lost on me. So many simple pleasures I'd denied myself to accommodate others' preferences. Halfway through my meal, a text arrived from an unexpected source. Christopher Reynolds. Heard you've joined Pinnacle. Congratulations. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet to discuss something business-related. No pressure. I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. Christopher had been decent to me at the wedding, defending my right to sit at the main table. But he was still Natalie's husband, still fundamentally connected to the world I was trying to leave behind. After finishing my wine, I replied, "Thank you. I'm available for coffee next Tuesday afternoon if that works for you." His response came quickly. "Perfect. Rainy day brew at 3 p.m. And Olivia, this isn't a setup or an ambush. Promise." I wanted to believe him. Despite everything with Natalie, I'd liked Christopher during our limited interactions. He seemed straightforward, lacking the Mitchell family tendency toward manipulation and appearance management. Tuesday arrived rainier than usual, Portland's skies opening into the kind of persistent downpour that seeps through inadequate raincoats and fogs eyeglasses. I arrived at Rainy Day Brew early, securing a corner table away from the windows and ordering a cappuccino to steady my nerves. Christopher entered at precisely 3, shaking water from his umbrella before spotting me. He looked different from the confident groom I'd last seen, slightly rumpled, with shadows under his eyes, suggesting sleepless nights. "Olivia," he greeted me with a tentative smile. "Thank you for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Though I admit I'm curious about what business matter brings you here." He ordered an Americano before answering. "I'll be direct. Things aren't going well with Mitchell Magic. Since the wedding." A pang of something, not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction, passed through me. "I'm sorry to hear that. 3 major clients have canceled their contracts. 2 vendors have refused to work with Natalie directly. The business is facing a serious reputation crisis." He looked at me steadily. "Your departure created a skills vacuum that's becoming increasingly apparent." So this was why he'd reached out, damage control. Natalie needed me back, and she'd sent Christopher to negotiate because she knew I wouldn't speak to her directly. "I appreciate your candor," I said carefully. "But I've signed a contract with Pinnacle. I'm starting there next week." "I know," he nodded. "I'm not asking you to come back. That ship has sailed, and frankly, after how Natalie treated you, I wouldn't expect you to consider it." This surprised. Then what are you asking?" His coffee arrived, and he took a moment to add sugar, stirring methodically. "I'd like to contract with you as a consultant, just you, not Pinnacle, to create a transition plan for Mitchell Magic, something to help Natalie salvage what's left of the business." I blinked, taken aback. "You want me to help save the business? After everything that happened?" "Not for Natalie's sake," he clarified. "For mine." At my puzzled expression, he continued. "I invested heavily in Mitchell Magic during our engagement. It seemed like a good bet at the time. The business was thriving, Natalie was passionate about it, and I wanted to support her dreams." He sighed. "What I didn't realize was how much of that success depended on you." "Does Natalie know you're meeting with me?" Christopher's hesitation told me everything. "No. She's struggling right now. Pride prevents her from acknowledging how much she needs your expertise. But I can't afford to let pride sink a significant financial investment." Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to tell Christopher that Natalie's business problems were entirely of her own making. But another part recognized the olive branch being extended. Not reconciliation exactly, but a chance to end things professionally rather than personally. What exactly would this consulting entail? I asked, neither accepting nor rejecting. Yet. 3 sessions, maximum. You review the current state of the business, identify critical gaps left by your departure, and create a roadmap for addressing them. I pay you directly at your professional consulting rate. No direct interaction with Natalie required. I considered his offer. There was a certain elegance to it, a chance to formally close that chapter of my life while being properly compensated for my expertise. It would also ensure I didn't leave Mitchell Magic in ruins out of spite, something that would ultimately reflect poorly on my own professional reputation. I'll need to check my contract with Pinnacle, I said. There might be non-compete clauses. That would prevent this arrangement. Of course, Christopher nodded. Take whatever time you need. And if I do this, I want something in return beyond the consulting fee. His eyebrows raised. What did you have in mind? A public acknowledgement on Mitchell Magic's website and social media of my contributions to the company during its growth period. Not an apology, just a factual statement recognizing my role. Christopher seemed to weigh this request, likely calculating Natalie's reaction against his business interests. I can make that happen, he finally agreed, though it might take some diplomatic efforts on my part. I imagine it will, I replied, unable to suppress a small smile at the thought of that conversation. As we finished our coffees, Christopher regarded me with genuine curiosity. How are you, Olivia? Really? The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. I'm rebuilding. Some days are harder than others, but I'm moving forward. He nodded. For what it's worth, I admire how you've handled all this. Most people wouldn't have shown such restraint. Restraint? You could have publicly destroyed Natalie's reputation after the wedding. That reporter from Portland Monthly told me you declined to comment on internal business matters when she contacted you. So Jennifer Kapoor had reached out to Christopher as well. Interesting. Burning Natalie's business to the ground wouldn't help me build mine, I said simply. Besides, she's still my sister, despite everything. As we prepared to leave, Christopher hesitated. There's something else you should know. Ryan has been trying to invest in my next development project, the one he was supposedly discussing at our wedding. My stomach tightened at the mention of Ryan's name. And? I turned him down yesterday. Told him I don't do business with people who lack basic integrity. He shrugged. Just thought you might like to know that actions have consequences, even in our circles. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it warmed me nonetheless. This tangible evidence that not everyone in Portland's upper echelons valued social connections above moral character. Thank you for telling me, I said sincerely. And for the coffee. Let me know about the consulting, he replied. Either way, no hard feelings. As I drove home through the rain, I felt an unexpected lightness. For the first time since the wedding disaster, I'd engaged with that world on my own terms. Not as Natalie's overlooked sister or Ryan's betrayed wife, but as Olivia Mitchell, professional whose expertise was valuable enough to be sought out and paid for properly. The next day, I reviewed my Pinnacle contract carefully. There was indeed a non-compete clause, but it applied specifically to working for competing event planning companies, not to short-term consulting for individual clients. Still, I wanted to be transparent. It's a reasonable request, Elaine said when I called to discuss Christopher's proposal. And frankly, handling it gracefully reflects well on you and, by extension, on Pinnacle. I have no objections as long as it's limited in scope and doesn't delay your start date with us. With that cleared, I contacted Christopher and agreed to his terms, sending over a formal consulting agreement with my rate, significantly higher than anything Natalie had ever offered me. He signed it without negotiation and scheduled our first session for later that week. I spent the evening organizing my notes and files from Mitchell Magic, preparing to approach the business as an objective consultant rather than an emotionally invested participant. It felt strange to review my own work with professional detachment, to evaluate strategies I'd implemented and systems I'd built as if they belonged to a stranger. In many ways, they did. The woman who had poured herself into Mitchell Magic, who had sacrificed her own advancement to support her sister's dreams, was someone I barely recognized anymore. Her desperate need for family approval, her willingness to diminish herself to avoid conflict, her acceptance of exploitation disguised as opportunity, all felt foreign now, like behaviors belonging to a different person entirely. Thursday morning, I met Christopher at a co-working space downtown, neutral territory for our consultation. He arrived with Mitchell Magic's current books, marketing analytics, and client lists, all materials I had once managed but now viewed through an outsider's lens. "It's worse than I initially thought," Christopher admitted as we reviewed the numbers. 3 canceled contracts, yes, but also a 70% drop in website inquiries and a significant decrease in social media engagement. I nodded, unsurprised. The online presence required consistent attention, daily posts, engagement with followers, relationship building with industry partners. It was essentially a full-time job unto itself, which Natalie now has to handle alone, on top of everything else. Along with the vendor relationships, client communication, and actual event execution, I added, scanning the spreadsheets. That's simply not sustainable for one person, especially someone whose strengths lie in aesthetic vision rather than systems management. For the next 2 hours, I methodically identified critical gaps and proposed solutions, hiring a part-time social media manager, implementing a streamlined client onboarding system, and rebuilding damaged vendor relationships through a structured outreach program. She needs to narrow her focus, I concluded. Right now, Mitchell Magic is trying to be everything to everyone. Luxury weddings, corporate events, sweet 16s, baby showers. That worked when there were effectively 2 people running the operation, but with just Natalie, she needs to specialize. Christopher took detailed notes, asking thoughtful questions that revealed a deeper business acumen than I'd previously given him credit for. By the end of our session, we had outlined a comprehensive transition plan designed to stabilize the business within 3 months. "This is extraordinarily helpful," he said as we wrapped up, "and more generous than we deserve, frankly." I shrugged. It's not about deserving, it's about doing what's professionally appropriate. As I packed up my materials, Christopher cleared his throat awkwardly. "Natalie knows about our meeting today. I told her last night." My hands stilled. "And?" "She was angry at first, then she cried." He looked uncomfortable sharing this intimate detail. "Eventually, she asked if you seemed happy." The question caught me off guard. Had Natalie ever concerned herself with my happiness before? "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you seem stronger, more certain, that you're moving forward professionally in ways that clearly suit you." I nodded, uncertain how to respond to this glimpse of my sister's vulnerability. "She wanted me to ask if you'd consider talking to her," Christopher added carefully. "Not about the business, just as sisters." A month ago, I would have jumped at this opening, eager to repair the relationship regardless of how much it had damaged me. Now, I felt a protective caution. "I'm not ready for that," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not yet. There's too much I'm still processing." Christopher seemed to respect this boundary. "I understand. I'll let her know." Our second consultation, the following week, was equally productive, focusing on client retention strategies and marketing repositioning. Christopher mentioned that Natalie had implemented several of my initial recommendations, including reaching out to key vendors with personal apologies, something that would have been unthinkable before the wedding disaster. "Pride comes before a fall," he remarked. Unfortunately, sometimes the fall is necessary before change can happen. By our final session, we had created a comprehensive roadmap for Mitchell Magic's recovery, not a return to its former state, but an evolution into something more sustainable. I also drafted the public acknowledgement text for my contributions, which Christopher promised would appear on Mitchell Magic's platforms the following week. As we concluded our professional relationship, Christopher extended his hand. Thank you, Olivia, not just for this, but for showing such integrity throughout a situation where it would have been easy to choose otherwise. I shook his hand firmly. I hope things work out, for the business and for you personally. His smile turned rueful. The business will recover. The marriage remains to be seen. I didn't probe further. Whatever was happening between Christopher and Natalie was their journey now, separate from mine. That weekend, my last before starting at Pinnacle, I focused on settling into my new apartment in the Pearl District. The space was gradually transforming from an empty shell into a home that reflected me. Clean lines, warm textures, splashes of color in unexpected places. Each item I unpacked had been chosen with intention, representing who I was becoming rather than who I'd been. Sunday afternoon, as I arranged books on newly installed shelves, my phone rang. Natalie. My heart jumped to my throat. After weeks of silence between us, her name on my screen felt jarring, like an intrusion from another life. I let it ring through to voicemail, needing time to decide whether I wanted to engage. Her message was brief. Liv, it's me. I just wanted to say thank you for helping Christopher with the transition plan. I know you didn't have to do that, and I know I don't deserve it. If you ever want to talk, well, you have my number. I miss you. I sat with the phone in my hand, emotions churning. The acknowledgement of her debt to me was new, a small crack in the edifice of entitlement that had defined our relationship. The admission that she missed me pulled at something deep and familial that persisted despite everything. But missing someone isn't the same as treating them better. Gratitude isn't the same as change. I wasn't ready to rebuild that bridge. Not when I was still constructing the foundation of my new life. I placed the phone aside without returning the call, turning my attention back to my bookshelves. A small act of self-determination, choosing what deserved space in my new home and what did not. Monday morning dawned clear and bright, Portland's temperamental weather offering a reprieve for my first day at Pinnacle. I dressed with care in a sage green suit that would have been too bold for Horizon Media and definitely too distinctive for Mitchell Magic, where Natalie preferred employees to be understated backgrounds for her own stylistic vision. The Pinnacle office hummed with focused energy when I arrived. Elaine met me at reception, guiding me to my new office where fresh flowers and a welcome basket awaited. The team is excited to have you on board, she said as I took in the space. Window-facing matte hood, sleek desk, walls ready for my personal touch. Especially after that Portland Monthly piece came out last week. I looked up in surprise. The article is published already? I thought it wasn't running until next month. They moved it up. Something about timely industry shifts. Elaine handed me a copy of the magazine. You come across remarkably well. The article, titled Rewriting the Script, Women Charting New Paths in Portland's Event Industry, featured a professional photo of me I'd taken during our interview and a profile that focused entirely on my new role at Pinnacle rather than the wedding drama. Jennifer Kapoor had honored our agreement, presenting me as a rising executive rather than a scorned sister and wife. Only one line hinted at my past. Mitchell brings a unique perspective to Pinnacle, having witnessed firsthand how women's contributions can be overlooked in creative industries, an experience she's determined not to replicate in her leadership role. It was restrained yet pointed, truthful without being vindictive. Perfect. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Have you seen the article? You look amazing. Drinks tonight to celebrate? Before I could reply, another message appeared. This, one from Ryan. Saw the Portland Monthly piece? Trying to make me look bad? I almost laughed at his self-centered interpretation. The article hadn't mentioned him at all, not even obliquely. His invisibility in my professional narrative was perhaps the greatest insult of all. He simply wasn't relevant enough to include. I deleted his message without responding and texted Sophie back. Absolutely. 7 p.m. at Riverfront Bar? My first day at Pinnacle unfolded in a whirlwind of introductions, system orientations, and project briefings. By late afternoon, I was deep in conversation with Marcus Chen about our approach to an upcoming charity gala, our first major project together. The client wants something that feels both exclusive and accessible, he explained, showing me concept boards for the event. High-end, but not alienating to average donors. I studied his designs, impressed by the sophisticated balance he'd achieved. This direction is perfect. What if we added interactive elements throughout the space? Installations that feel luxurious but invite participation. Marcus's eyes lit up. Like projection mapping on blank canvases that responds to guest movement? Or a champagne wall where removing a glass reveals a donor's impact story? Exactly, I nodded, excited by how quickly he built on my suggestion. Experiences that feel special, but inclusive. We spent the next hour expanding this concept, ideas flowing in an easy creative exchange I'd rarely experienced at Mitchell. Magic, where my suggestions were often filtered through Natalie's controlling vision. At 5 o'clock, Elaine appeared in my doorway. How's the first day treating you? Wonderfully, I replied honestly. It feels right. Glad to hear it. She smiled, then added, by the way, I noticed something interesting this morning. Mitchell Magic updated their website with a formal acknowledgement of your contributions to their company over the past 2 years. Quite complimentary, actually. So Christopher had kept his word. Is that right? Indeed. Very professional of them. Elaine's knowing look suggested she understood more than she was saying. It's rare to see such grace in this industry when partnerships end. Sometimes ending things properly is as important as how they begin, I observed. Wise words, she nodded. Well, don't stay too late on your first day. Make a good impression, but set healthy boundaries from the start. After she left, I pulled up the Mitchell Magic website, curious to see the acknowledgement Christopher and I had drafted together. There it was on their About page, prominently displayed. Mitchell Magic Weddings acknowledges with gratitude the significant contributions of Olivia Mitchell from 2022-2024. As our marketing strategist and operations consultant, Olivia helped shape our brand identity, established our digital presence, and built many of the vendor relationships that define our business today. Her creative vision and business acumen were instrumental in our growth, and we wish her continued success in her new role at Pinnacle Events. The words were professional, factual, and long overdue. Seeing my name on that page, my contributions finally acknowledged in writing, provided a closure I hadn't realized I still needed. As I gathered my things to meet Sophie, my phone rang. Again, Natalie for the second time in 2 days. This time, perhaps softened by the acknowledgement on her website, I answered. Hello, Natalie. Liv. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, uncertain. I didn't think you'd pick up. I almost didn't, I admitted. I saw the Portland Monthly article. You looked powerful. Thank you. An awkward silence stretched between us, years of complicated history making even simple conversation difficult. I published the acknowledgement, she finally said. On the website and social media. Christopher said you wanted it, but honestly, it should have been there all along. Yes, I agreed simply. It should have. Another pause, this one heavier. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything, for taking you for granted, for the wedding seating, for not standing up to Ryan. I've been a terrible sister. The apology sounded genuine, but I'd been burned too many times by Natalie's momentary remorse, followed by unchanged behavior. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. Do you think... Could we maybe meet sometime? Not right away, but eventually? I considered her request, weighing my own healing against the pull of family ties that, despite everything, still existed. Maybe, I said finally. Not now. I need time and space to establish my own life first. But someday, perhaps. I'll take maybe, she responded, a hint of the old Natalie's determination breaking through. It's better than never. After we hung up, I sat for a moment in my new office, surrounded by the trappings of my new professional identity. The conversation had been brief, neither fully reconciliatory nor completely dismissive. Like everything in life after upheaval, it existed in an in-between state, not quite resolution, not quite conflict. And that, I realized, was perfectly acceptable. Some relationships can't be neatly concluded with either complete reunion or total severance. Some continue to evolve, changing form as the people within them change. Natalie would always be my sister, but what that meant going forward would depend on who we both became in the aftermath of our shared crisis. As I left the Pinnacle office for my drinks with Sophie, I felt a sense of equilibrium that had been missing for years. Not happiness. Exactly. That felt too simple for the complex emotions of rebuilding a life. But something richer. Self-possession. The certainty that whatever came next, I would face it as myself, not as anyone's appendage or afterthought. The evening air held a hint of autumn crispness, Portland's endless summer finally yielding to the next season. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with possibility, and walked toward the riverfront, not looking back but not running away either. Simply moving forward, one deliberate step at a time, into a future I was now free to create. My first month at Pinnacle passed in a blur of creative meetings, client presentations, and team building. I threw myself into the work with an energy that surprised even me, relishing the chance to apply my skills without apology or constraint. Each morning I woke eager to face the day, no longer dreading the subtle diminishment that had characterized my time at Mitchell Magic, or the growing distance that had defined my final months with Ryan. The charity gala Marcus and I had conceptualized was coming together beautifully. Our interactive installations had evolved into a cohesive experience that guided guests through the organization's impact story while encouraging unprecedented donation levels. The client, a foundation supporting arts education in underserved communities, had enthusiastically approved our proposal, expanding the budget to accommodate our most ambitious elements. We've never worked with a planning team that so completely understood our mission, the foundation director had gushed during our last meeting. This isn't just an event, it's a physical manifestation of our values. I had smiled, sharing a satisfied glance with Marcus. This was what I had always wanted, creating experiences with genuine meaning, not just aesthetic appeal. Pinnacle was giving me the platform to do that work at a scale I had only imagined. After the meeting, Elaine had pulled me aside. The Brennan Foundation has been trying to work with Pinnacle for 3 years, she confided. They always chose other firms in the final selection process, until you joined our team. The validation warmed me, not because I needed external approval anymore, but because it confirmed I was making the right impact in my new role. My personal life was stabilizing as well. My new apartment had become a true sanctuary, decorated entirely according to my own taste. Rich jewel tones, contemporary art, and comfortable furnishings that invited both relaxation and creativity. No compromises for Ryan's preference for sterile minimalism. No concessions to Natalie's opinion on what was tasteful. The divorce proceedings were moving forward smoothly. Ryan had initially contested some of my financial claims, but backed down when my lawyer presented documented evidence of my contributions to our shared assets. We now communicated exclusively through our attorneys, a blessed relief from his attempts to manipulate me directly. What I hadn't anticipated was how news of my story would spread through Portland's tight-knit professional circles. The Portland Monthly article had opened a floodgate of interest. Women in various industries reached out to share similar experiences of unacknowledged labor and family exploitation. Some sought advice on breaking free. Others simply wanted to express solidarity. One Tuesday evening, as I responded to these messages at my dining table, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Olivia Mitchell speaking," I answered professionally. "Ms. Mitchell, hello, this is Caroline West from KPTV News." The woman's voice was warm but direct. "I'm producing a segment on women entrepreneurs in Portland, and your name came up repeatedly in my research." Television now? The spread of my story was beginning to feel overwhelming. "I appreciate your interest," I said cautiously, "but I've already spoken with Portland Monthly about my professional journey." "Yes, I read that piece." "Very impressive," Caroline replied. "But I'm actually interested in something different. We're exploring how women can advocate for themselves in professional settings, particularly when family relationships complicate the dynamic. Your experience offers valuable insights on setting boundaries and claiming credit for your work." I hesitated. On one hand, I'd been trying to move forward rather than dwell on the past. On the other, if my experience could help other women avoid similar situations, wasn't there value in sharing it? "This wouldn't focus on the personal details of your family situation," Caroline added, sensing my hesitation. "We're interested in the broader lessons. How to recognize when you're being undervalued, how to negotiate for proper recognition, how to rebuild professionally after a significant rupture." Put that way, it sounded less like airing dirty laundry and more like contributing to an important conversation. "When would this segment air?" I asked. "We're looking at 3 weeks from now, part of our Women in Business special. The interview itself would take about an hour, at our studio downtown." I considered the timing. My divorce would likely be finalized by then. The charity gala would be completed. I would be speaking from a position of established success rather than recent upheaval. "I'd like to review the questions beforehand," I said. "And I'd need to clear this with Pinnacle's PR team." "Of course," Caroline agreed readily. "I can send over a general outline today, and we can work with your PR department on any sensitive areas." After we disconnected, I sat with the decision I'd just tentatively made. Was I ready to discuss my experience publicly, even in professional terms? Would Natalie see it as a betrayal, a public shaming? Would it reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal? I decided to sleep on it, but by morning, I had reached clarity. This wasn't about Natalie anymore. It was about the countless women who remained silent about their contributions, who accepted less than they deserved out of family loyalty or fear of conflict. If my story could encourage even one person to advocate for herself, the discomfort would be worthwhile. Pinnacle's PR director, May Lynn, supported my decision after reviewing Caroline's proposed questions. "This positions you as a thought leader," she noted. "It's exactly the kind of visibility we want for our executive team. Substantive, purposeful, aligned with our values of recognition and empowerment." With Pinnacle's blessings secured, I confirmed the interview date with Caroline. The following weeks were busy enough to prevent me from overthinking my decision. The charity gala was entering its final planning phase, requiring intensive coordination with vendors, venues, and volunteers. I was also interviewing candidates for 2 new positions on my team, building out Pinnacle's Portland division with careful attention to complementary skills and cultural fit. 3 days before the scheduled interview, I received a text from Natalie. Heard you're doing a TV segment. Please don't destroy what's left of my reputation. The business is still struggling. The message caught me off guard. How had she heard about the interview? More importantly, why was her first assumption that I intended to damage her? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on. The segment focuses on professional development and self-advocacy, not personal drama. Mitchell Magic won't be mentioned by name. Her reply came quickly. Thank you, and good luck. You always were better on camera than me. The small acknowledgement felt significant, Natalie admitting, however obliquely, that I possessed a skill she lacked. In our childhood and early adulthood, such admissions had been vanishingly rare. The morning of the interview, I dressed carefully, in a deep aubergine blazer over a silk shell, professional but distinctive. Sophie had helped me prepare the previous evening, asking pointed questions and challenging me when my answers became too diplomatic or vague. Don't sugarcoat it, she had insisted. You don't need to name names, but don't minimize what happened either. Your experience matters. Other women need to hear it. The KPTV studio was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate in a way that felt both reassuring and intimidating. Caroline West greeted me warmly, guiding me through the process as a makeup artist, made subtle adjustments to my appearance under the studio lights. We'll keep this conversational, Caroline explained as we took our seats. Just focus on me, not the cameras. I'll guide us through the topics we discussed. Once the recording began, my initial nervousness faded. Caroline was a skilled interviewer, creating natural transitions between questions that allowed me to speak authentically without feeling exposed. Many women struggle to advocate for themselves professionally, especially when working with family, she noted. What advice would you give someone who feels their contributions are being overlooked? I considered the question carefully. Document everything, I said finally. Keep records of your ideas, your work products, the results you achieve. In family businesses especially, there's often an expectation that your labor is given freely out of loyalty. But if you can point to tangible value you've created, it becomes harder for anyone to dismiss your contributions. And if that documentation doesn't change how you're treated, Caroline pressed, then you have a decision to make, I replied. About whether staying in that environment serves your long-term goals, or whether your talents might flourish more fully elsewhere. It's not disloyal to recognize when a situation is fundamentally unbalanced, when promises made aren't being kept. Sometimes the most self-respecting choice is to walk away. We continued through various aspects of professional self-advocacy, negotiating fair compensation, building independent networks, establishing clear boundaries. Throughout, I focused on constructive lessons rather than personal grievances, on empowerment rather than victimhood. Near the end of the interview, Caroline asked a question that hadn't been on our approved list. You've experienced significant personal and professional upheaval recently, yet instead of retreating, you've stepped into an even more visible leadership role. Where does that courage come from? The unexpected query momentarily threw me. I paused, searching for an honest answer that wouldn't veer into territory I wasn't prepared to discuss. I'm not sure I'd call it courage, I said finally. It's more like clarity. When you've spent years accommodating others at your own expense, there's a particular kind of freedom in finally honoring your own value. Once I recognized that my skills and perspective deserved respect, the path forward became obvious. It wasn't about being brave enough to leave. It was about being honest enough to acknowledge I deserved more. Caroline nodded thoughtfully. That distinction between courage and clarity is powerful. Thank you for sharing that insight. After the cameras stopped rolling, she thanked me again. This is exactly the substantive conversation we hoped for. It will resonate with many viewers. When will it air? I asked, removing my microphone. Next Thursday evening at 7:30, and then it will be available on our website afterward. We'll send you a link once it's live. As I left the studio, a mixture of relief and apprehension washed over me. I had shared personal truths in a public forum, something the old Olivia would have found unthinkable. Yet I had done so without bitterness, without naming Natalie or Ryan directly, focusing instead on the universal lessons of my experience. Walking to my car, I noticed a familiar figure leaning against the studio building, Ryan. My stomach tightened as he straightened and approached. "Quite the media darling these days," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes hard. "First Portland. Monthly, now television. What's next? A memoir. What are you doing here, Ryan?" I kept my voice steady, refusing to show the discomfort his sudden appearance provoked. "Christopher mentioned you were filming today. Thought we might talk afterward." He gestured toward a nearby coffee shop. "Got a minute? Or are you too tewy? Important now for your almost ex-husband?" The passive aggression was so familiar it almost made me laugh. This had been Ryan's pattern throughout our marriage, creating no-win situations where refusing his reasonable requests made me the unreasonable one. "Our lawyers are handling everything," I reminded him. "If there's something specific you need to discuss, you can contact Daniel." Ryan's expression hardened. "This isn't about the divorce. This is about you publicly humiliating me. First at the wedding, now with these interviews. Do you have any idea what this is doing to my professional reputation? Clients are asking questions. Investors are hesitant." "I haven't mentioned you by name in any interview," I pointed out. "Not once. You don't have to. Portland's business community isn't that big. Everyone knows we're divorcing. Everyone knows about the wedding incident. And now you're positioning yourself as some victim of exploitation? People can connect the dots, Olivia." I studied him. The man I had once loved, once trusted with my heart and future. Now he seemed smaller somehow, his concerns petty, his perspective narrow. People can indeed connect dots, Ryan, including the dots that lead from your wedding ring to Vanessa's earrings. I kept my voice level, refusing to match his agitation. "But this isn't about exposing you. It's about sharing lessons that might help other women value themselves properly. If that makes you uncomfortable, perhaps you should examine why." "So self-righteous," he scoffed. "You act like you're completely innocent. But you checked out of our marriage long before Vanessa. You were obsessed with proving yourself to Natalie, with saving her business. I was just there. Convenient until I wasn't." There was a grain of truth in his accusation. I had invested enormous energy in Mitchell Magic, often at the expense of my marriage. But Ryan was conveniently ignoring his own choices, his own agency, and how our relationship had unraveled. "I made mistakes," I acknowledged. "I prioritized Natalie's business over our relationship sometimes. That was wrong, and I own that. But you chose deception, Ryan. You chose to build a relationship with another woman while maintaining the appearance of commitment to me. Those aren't equivalent actions." He looked away, jaw tight. "So what now? You continue your public reinvention while painting me as the villain." "No one is painting you as anything. I'm sharing my experience without naming you. I'm rebuilding my life without diminishing yours. I suggest you do the same." As I turned to leave, Ryan called after me. "She's pregnant, you know. Vanessa. 3 months along." The words hit like a physical blow, stopping me in my tracks. I turned slowly to face him. "Excuse me?" Ryan had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I was going to tell you through the lawyers. We're getting married next month, after our divorce is finalized." A child. Ryan and Vanessa were having a child. The timeline meant she had been newly pregnant at Natalie's wedding, perhaps even before Ryan and I had separated. The final piece of betrayal slotted into place with devastating clarity. "Congratulations," I managed, proud of how steady my voice remained despite the churning in my stomach. "I wish you both well." I walked away then, not waiting for his response, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing how deeply his revelation had affected me. In my car, I sat with hands gripping the steering wheel, processing this new information. Ryan was starting a family with the woman he'd cheated with. They would have the child I had always imagined having with him someday, when the timing was right, when we were ready. Except, he had been ready, just not with me. The pain was sharp but surprisingly clean, lacking the jagged edges of earlier revelations. Perhaps because this belonged wholly to Ryan's future, not to our shared past. Whatever family he created with Vanessa existed in a life that no longer intersected with mine. I drove to the Pinnacle office rather than home, needing the comfort of purposeful work rather than solitude. Marcus was still there, finalizing details for the charity gala installation. "You okay?" he asked, noting my expression as I joined him in the conference room. "Interview rough?" "Interview was fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just ran into Ryan afterward, found out he's having a baby with Vanessa. They're getting married next month." Marcus winced. "That's a lot to process. Want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Actually, I'd rather focus on the gala. Show me where we are with the projection mapping." He studied me for a moment, then nodded, respecting my choice to channel emotion into productivity. For the next 2 hours, we refined technical specifications and finalized material selections, the work providing blessed relief from unwanted thoughts. As we were preparing to leave, Marcus hesitated. "Listen, a bunch of us are going to Riverside Tavern for drinks. Nothing fancy, just the design team unwinding. Want to join? Might be better than going home to an empty apartment right now." The invitation touched me. Not just the offer itself, but the understanding behind it. These people who had known me for only a month already showed more consideration for my well-being than my sister or husband had in years. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself. "Thank you." The tavern was lively, but not overwhelming. A comfortable space where conversation flowed easily among the Pinnacle team. They welcomed me without making a fuss, including me in discussions about everything from upcoming projects to Portland's best food carts. It felt normal, collegiate, refreshingly free of the complex dynamics that had characterized my previous relationships. After my second glass of wine, I found myself chatting with Zoe Chen, Pinnacle's logistics coordinator and Marcus's sister. "So," she said with a directness I was coming to appreciate, "we've all been wondering, but no one wants to ask. Is it weird competing directly with your sister now? Portland's event planning world isn't that big." The question might have felt invasive from someone else, but Zoe's straightforward curiosity seemed genuine rather than gossipy. "It's evolving," I answered thoughtfully. "Initially, I worried about it, whether clients would feel caught in the middle, whether vendors would feel pressured to choose sides. But the reality is that Pinnacle and Mitchell Magic serve different market segments now. There's room for both of us to succeed." "Diplomatic answer," Zoe grinned. "But seriously, when you run into her at industry events, is it awkward? Death stares? Passive-aggressive comments about table settings?" I laughed despite myself. "We haven't actually crossed paths professionally yet. But when we do," I considered the question seriously, "I think it will be cordial, professional. We're both trying to move forward." "That's remarkably mature," Zoe observed. "If my brother hijacked my business after I saved it, then seated me in the kitchen at his wedding, I'd still be plotting elaborate revenge scenarios involving public humiliation and possibly fire ants." "Zoe!" Marcus interjected, overhearing as he returned with fresh drinks. "Boundaries, remember? We talked about this." "It's fine," I assured him, finding Zoe's frankness oddly refreshing after months of carefully managed conversations. And, for the record, I did consider the fire ants, but ultimately, success is the best revenge. The group laughed, and the conversation moved on to safer topics. By the time I left, I felt lighter somehow, as if sharing the weight of my experience, even through humor, had diminished its power. The following morning, my lawyer called with news. The divorce was final. The judge had signed the decree, officially ending my marriage to Ryan Foster. The apartment was his. Certain investments and a fair cash settlement were mine. Clean, straightforward, complete. I sat at my kitchen counter after the call, sipping coffee and absorbing the finality of it. 4 years of marriage, concluded with signatures on legal documents. No ceremony to mark the ending, no ritual to acknowledge the grief alongside the relief. Just bureaucratic confirmation that we were no longer legally bound to one another. On impulse, I texted Sophie. Divorce finalized this morning. Free woman. Drinks tonight to celebrate, commemorate. Her response was immediate. Absolutely. My place, 7 p.m., bringing champagne and tissues. Both might be needed. Sophie understood what few others did, that even necessary endings deserve acknowledgement, that relief and sadness can coexist without contradiction. The charity gala was scheduled for that weekend, leaving little time for dwelling on personal matters. The final days of preparation consumed my full attention, each detail requiring verification and last-minute adjustments. By Friday afternoon, the venue transformation was complete, our interactive installations seamlessly integrated into the historic ballroom space. I walked through the empty venue with Elaine, conducting a final inspection before guests arrived. This exceeds all expectations, she said, watching how the projection mapping brought the blank walls to life with dynamic imagery of arts education in action. The Brennan Foundation will be thrilled. It's a team effort, I replied, though pride warmed me at her praise. Marcus deserves most of the credit for the technical execution. The concept was yours, Elaine countered. The narrative flow, the emotional progression through the space, that's the framework that makes the technical elements meaningful. We continued our walkthrough, pausing at each installation to ensure functionality. At the donor recognition wall, where guests could place their hands on a sensor that would reveal the impact of various donation levels through personalized projections, Elaine touched my arm. I've been meaning to tell you, the board was impressed with your KPTV interview. They appreciated how you addressed difficult topics with professionalism and grace. The segment hasn't aired yet, I noted, confused. They saw the advance copy that Caroline sent over for our approval, Elaine explained. It's genuine without being sensationalistic, instructive without being preachy, exactly the kind of representation we want for Pinnacle. Her words reassured me. I had worried, despite everything, that sharing my experience publicly might reflect poorly on me professionally, that potential clients might see me as difficult or dramatic, rather than principled. Thank you for saying that, I said sincerely. I've been second-guessing my decision to do the interview. Don't, Elaine said firmly. Women in this industry need to hear exactly what you shared, that their contributions deserve recognition, that their skills have market value. It's a message that benefits all of us. The gala itself was a triumph beyond my most optimistic projections. Guests moved through the space with visible wonder, engaging deeply with each installation. Donation pledges exceeded the foundation's target by nearly 40%. The client coordinator actually cried when thanking me, overcome by the tangible impact our design had created. Near the end of the evening, as guests were beginning to depart, I noticed a familiar figure by the entrance, Christopher Reynolds. He nodded when our eyes met, indicating he'd like to speak with me. Remarkable work, he said as I approached. The integration of story and space is unlike anything I've seen at a fundraising event. Thank you, I replied, genuinely pleased by his appreciation. What brings you here? Are you a Brennan Foundation supporter? New board member, he explained. I joined last month as part of my company's community engagement initiative. When I saw Pinnacle was handling tonight's event, I made a point of attending. I nodded, unsure what else to say. Our consulting relationship had ended weeks ago, and our personal connection existed only through my estranged sister. "Natalie saw your interview preview," Christopher continued after a brief silence. "The station sent it to Mitchell Magic for fact-checking, since your experience there was referenced obliquely." My stomach tightened. "And?" "She approved it, without changes. Said you were fair in how you presented things." This surprised me. I had expected resistance, perhaps even legal challenges to prevent the segment from airing. "That's good to hear," I managed. Christopher hesitated, then added, "She's making changes, Olivia. Real ones. Hired an actual staff now, gives proper credit to her team." The wedding incident was a wake-up call in more ways than one. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me was glad to hear Natalie was evolving, becoming a better business owner and perhaps a better person. Another part remained wary of getting pulled back into her orbit, of having my boundaries eroded by familial obligation. "I'm glad," I said carefully, "for her sake, and for the people working with her." He seemed to understand my caution. "I'm not trying to broker a reconciliation. That's between you two, if and when you're ever ready. I just thought you should know that your stand had impact beyond your own situation. You changed things for others too." The notion that my actions had created positive ripple effects beyond my personal liberation was deeply gratifying. Perhaps there was meaning in the pain after all, not just in what it had freed me to become, but in how it had forced others to reconsider their own behavior. "Thank you for telling me," I said sincerely. "It matters to know that." As Christopher departed, I turned back to supervise the beginning of breakdown and cleanup. The evening had been personally and professionally validating in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Confirmation that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. Later that night, as I finally returned to my apartment, exhausted but exhilarated, I found a small package propped against my door. Inside was a bottle of champagne with a note in unfamiliar handwriting. "Congratulations on the Brennan Foundation success. Your work tonight was extraordinary. Nah. Natalie." She must have attended the gala without approaching me, observed my work from a distance. The gesture was unexpected, acknowledgement without intrusion, recognition without demand. I placed the champagne in my refrigerator, not yet ready to accept the olive branch it represented, but not rejecting it either. Like so much in this new chapter of my life, it would wait until I decided what place, if any, it should occupy in my future. The following Thursday, the KPTV segment aired as scheduled. I watched from Sophie's apartment, surrounded by friends, who had supported me through the darkest moments of the past 6 months. The interview came across exactly as I'd hoped, focused on professional empowerment rather than personal drama, offering constructive insights rather than recriminations. My phone buzzed with messages throughout the evening, colleagues expressing support, acquaintances sharing similar experiences, even vendors I'd worked with at Mitchell Magic offering belated recognition of my contributions. The last message of the night came from an unexpected source, my mother, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the wedding aftermath and divorce proceedings. "Saw your interview," her text read. "You spoke well. Your father and I are proud of what you're accomplishing at Pinnacle." I stared at the message, emotions conflicted. Where had this pride been when I was working myself to exhaustion at Mitchell Magic? Where was their support when Natalie seated me in the kitchen at her wedding? The belated recognition felt both welcome and insufficient. Sophie noticed my expression. "What is it?" I showed her the text. "First contact since everything happened." She read it twice before responding. "Classic Mitchell family move. Acknowledge the success. Ignore the struggle that preceded it." Her assessment was painfully accurate, My parents had always been more comfortable celebrating achievements than addressing injustices, more willing to praise outcomes than examine processes. "Should I respond?" I asked, genuinely uncertain. "Only if you want to," Sophie advised. "Their approval doesn't have to matter anymore, remember. That's the whole point of everything you've built." She was right, of course. The old Olivia would have grasped desperately at this small offering, would have used it as an opening to reestablish connection regardless of cost. The woman I was becoming understood that relationships needed to be balanced to be healthy, that reconciliation required acknowledgement of harm before healing could begin. I set the phone aside without replying, neither rejecting the contact nor rushing to embrace it. Like the champagne from Natalie, like the potential of future family connections, it could wait until I was ready, until I could engage from a position of strength rather than need. The evening concluded with laughter and conversation among friends who valued me as I was, not for what I could provide or who I was related to. As I prepared to leave, Sophie hugged me tightly. "I'm so damn proud of you," she whispered. "Not just for the fancy new job or the TV interview, for finding your voice, for using it, for creating a life that actually fits who you are." Her words encapsulated everything the past 6 months had been about, not just professional advancement or personal independence, but the fundamental reclamation of my own narrative. I had stopped being a secondary character in other people's stories and finally become the protagonist of my own. Outside, Portland's autumn air carried the scent of rain and possibility. I tilted my face to the night sky, breathing deeply. There would be more challenges ahead, more decisions about what to preserve and what to discard from my former life. The journey wasn't complete, but for the first time in memory, I was traveling it on my own terms, guided by my own wisdom rather than others' expectations, and that made all the difference. One year after walking out of Natalie's wedding, I stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, accepting the Portland Business Journal's Rising Star Executive Award. The room was filled with the city's business elite, their attention focused on me as I gripped the heavy crystal trophy. "Thank you for this recognition," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined standing here. Not because I doubted my abilities, but because I had spent so long making myself smaller to accommodate others' expectations. The audience was silent, attentive in a way that still felt unfamiliar. This genuine interest in my words, my perspective, my journey. The path that led me here wasn't straight or easy. It required walking away from situations that diminished me, even when those situations involved people I loved. It meant acknowledging my own value when others wouldn't. Most importantly, it meant building something new, not just professionally, but personally. From my vantage point at the podium, I could see my Pinnacle team at their table near the front, Elaine nodding encouragingly. Sophie sat with them as my invited guest, beaming with undisguised pride. In the back corner, almost hidden in shadow, sat a figure I hadn't expected to see. Natalie, alone, watching intently. This award recognizes the work we've done at Pinnacle. Events over the past year, doubling our Portland client base, expanding our team, and pioneering new approaches to immersive event experiences. But for me, it represents something more fundamental: the power of claiming your own worth, even when, especially when, others try to deny it. As I concluded my speech to generous applause, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with the award itself. The external recognition was gratifying, certainly, but the internal validation, the quiet certainty that I was living authentically, was the true achievement. At the reception afterward, colleagues and competitors alike approached to offer congratulations. I navigated the conversations with an ease that would have been impossible a year earlier, no longer second-guessing my right to occupy professional space. Eventually, I found myself at the edge of the room, momentarily alone with my champagne and my thoughts. That's when Natalie approached, hesitant in a way that still seemed strange on her. "Congratulations, Liv," she said, keeping a respectful distance. "Your speech was beautiful. Honest." "Thank you," I replied, studying her. She looked different, still polished, still beautiful, but somehow less perfect. The invulnerable facade had acquired subtle cracks. "I didn't expect to see you here." She nodded, understanding. "I wasn't sure about coming, but when I saw you were receiving this award, I wanted to be here, to see it." In the year since our confrontation, Natalie and I had established a careful detente, occasional text messages, a brief coffee meeting 3 months ago that had been civil but guarded. Never the easy closeness we'd once shared as children before. Competition and comparison had poisoned our relationship, but not the raw antagonism of the wedding aftermath either. "How are things with Mitchell Magic?" I asked, genuinely curious. Christopher had mentioned during our last accidental meeting that the business was stabilizing under Natalie's revised approach. "Better," she admitted. "Smaller scale than before, more focused. I'm doing wedding planning exclusively now. No corporate events, no sweet 16s, just weddings, which is what I always loved anyway." "That makes sense," I nodded. "Playing to your strengths." "I learned that from you, actually." A flash of the old Natalie appeared, a quick, disarming smile. "Focus on what you do best, delegate or drop the rest." The acknowledgement of my business wisdom, once so desperately sought and denied, now felt almost ironic in its timing. I didn't need her validation anymore, which perhaps made it easier for her to give. "And how are things with Christopher?" I asked, noticing her husband's absence. Her smile faded slightly. "We're working on things. The wedding fiasco forced us to have some difficult conversations about values, about the kind of partnership we wanted. It hasn't been easy, but it's been necessary." I appreciated her honesty, the absence of the glossy perfection she would once have projected. "I'm glad you're figuring it out," I said sincerely. A comfortable silence settled between us, neither hostile nor intimate, just two adults with shared history and separate paths, momentarily intersecting. "Ryan and Vanessa had their baby last month," Natalie said finally. "A boy." Mom showed me pictures. The information produced only the faintest twinge of what might have been regret. Ryan's new life had ceased to feel relevant to mine months ago, around the time I'd started dating James, a literature professor I'd met at a Pinnacle-sponsored literary fundraiser. "I hope they're happy," I said, meaning it. The anger had faded, replaced by a detached wish for general well-being, the most genuine sentiment I could offer regarding my ex-husband and his new family. Natalie studied me, perhaps searching for signs of lingering pain. Finding none, she smiled slightly. "You really are different now, stronger, more yourself. That's what happens when you stop contorting yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you," I replied, not unkindly. Before she could respond, Elaine approached, elegant as always in her signature monochrome suit. "Olivia, the journal photographer wants a few more shots of you with the award. Could you spare a moment?" "Of course," I agreed, turning back to Natalie. "Excuse me." She nodded, understanding the natural end of our conversation. "Liv," she called softly, as I began to move away. "I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm really proud of what you've built." The words landed differently than they might have a year ago, pleasant rather than essential, appreciated but not needed. "Thank you," I said simply before following Elaine toward the photographer. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. By the time James picked me up, I was pleasantly exhausted, content to lean against his shoulder in the car as he drove us home. "How does it feel to be Portland's rising star executive?" he asked, squeezing my hand at a stoplight. I considered the question seriously. Validating, but also just one piece of a much larger picture. At home, our home now, since James T. had moved in 2 months ago, I placed the award on the shelf beside other mementos of the year's journey. The framed Portland Monthly article, a photo of the Pinnacle team after the charity gala, the business card Elaine had given me on my first day, my name and title embossed in silver. James wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Quite a collection you're building." "Quite a life," I corrected gently, leaning into his embrace. Later, as we lay talking in the darkness, I shared my brief exchange with Natalie. James listened attentively, as he always did, neither dismissing the complexity of sibling relationships nor suggesting easy reconciliation. "Do you think you'll ever be close again?" he asked when I finished. "Not like before," I answered honestly. "Too much has happened, too many patterns established. But maybe something new eventually, something healthier, with better boundaries." He nodded against my shoulder. "Relationships can evolve when people do." "Some relationships," I qualified. "Others need to end entirely for growth to happen." We both knew I was thinking of Ryan, of the clean break that had ultimately been necessary. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt after they collapse. The following morning brought a text from Sophie. "Congratulations again. Front page of the business section, grabbing extra copies for your scrapbook." Sure enough, the Portland Business Journal had featured a photo of me accepting the award, alongside quotes from my speech about claiming personal worth. The headline read, "From behind the scenes to center stage, Olivia Mitchell's journey to executive excellence." As I prepared for work, another message arrived. This one from my father, who had remained largely on the periphery during my estrangement from Natalie. "Your mother and I saw the journal article. Very impressive. We'd like to take you to dinner next week to celebrate, if you're available." The invitation represented another small shift in the Mitchell family dynamic. My parents, who had always gravitated toward Natalie's more obvious achievements, now sought to acknowledge mine without her mediating presence. I typed a careful response. "Thank you. Dinner would be nice. I'd like to bring James if that's all right." My father's reply came quickly. "Of course, we'd like to meet him." This simple exchange, direct communication, clear boundaries, mutual respect, exemplified how all my relationships had transformed over the past year. No manipulation, no diminishment, no sacrificing of my needs to maintain artificial harmony. At the Pinnacle office, I was greeted with a small celebration, flowers, champagne, and a card signed by the entire team. Elaine pulled me aside after the impromptu gathering dispersed. "The board is impressed with your division's performance," she said without preamble. "They've approved the expansion we discussed. You'll have budget for 3 additional hires and the new downtown satellite office." "That's fantastic news," I replied, already mentally calculating how this growth would position us against competitors. "When can we begin the process?" "Immediately. And Olivia," she added, handing me a folder. "They've also approved your promotion to regional director. The entire Pacific Northwest will fall under your supervision once we open the Seattle office next quarter." The promotion exceeded even my ambitious expectations. Regional director, a position that would place me on Pinnacle's executive leadership team, with significant influence over company strategy and culture. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by this vote of confidence. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Elaine replied simply. "You've proven yourself many times over." That evening, as I shared the news with James over dinner at our favorite neighborhood restaurant, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. From the humiliation of being seated in the kitchen at Natalie's wedding, to becoming a regional executive at one of the industry's most prestigious firms. To the regional director, James toasted, raising his wine glass. May your empire continue to expand. I laughed, clinking my glass against his. Hardly an empire, just the natural result of hard work finally being recognized. And of you demanding that recognition, he reminded me gently. Don't minimize your own agency in this story, Olivia. You didn't just work hard, you stood up for yourself when it mattered most. His perspective, as always, helped me see my own journey more clearly. I hadn't simply been lucky or opportunistic. I had made difficult choices, established painful but necessary boundaries, prioritized my own growth even when it meant letting go of relationships that had once seemed essential to my identity. You're right, I acknowledged. I did fight for this. I just never expected to win so completely. Later that night, I stood on our apartment balcony, watching Portland's lights shimmer against the darkness. A year ago, I had stood at a similar threshold, between past and future, between acceptance and resistance, between diminishment and growth. The woman who had walked away from her sister's wedding reception had been propelled by raw pain and newfound clarity, uncertain where her stand would lead, but knowing she could no longer remain where she was. The woman who now gazed at the city skyline stood firmly in her power, not perfect or complete, but authentically herself in a way that had once seemed impossible. I thought of all the women who might be standing at similar crossroads tonight, weighing the security of the familiar against the potential of the unknown, measuring the cost of speaking up against the price of remaining silent. I hoped some of them might find courage in my story, might recognize their own worth before spending years allowing others to determine it for them. The vibration of my phone interrupted these reflections. A text from Natalie. Heard about your promotion. Regional Director. Incredible achievement. Let me know if you'd be open to lunch sometime next month. No pressure. I smiled slightly. At the careful phrasing, the respect for boundaries that would have been unthinkable from the Natalie of a year ago. Perhaps we were both evolving, learning to relate as equals rather than as competitor and competitor, taker and giver. Thank you, I replied. Lunch would be nice. Let's find a date that works. This tentative reconnection felt different from previous patterns, not a return to old dynamics, but the potential beginning of something new. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to be defined by it. Not erasing boundaries, but establishing healthier ones. As I turned to go inside, I caught my reflection in the balcony door's glass. Straight-backed, clear-eyed, undiminished. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been moments of doubt, of grief, of second-guessing. But standing now in the life I had built for myself, I knew with absolute certainty that I would make the same choice again. To walk away from the kitchen, to claim my rightful place, to insist on being valued rather than merely useful. Some would call it courage. Others might label it selfishness. I had come to understand it as something simpler and more fundamental: self-respect. The recognition that I deserved a seat at the table, not just any table, but one where my contributions were acknowledged, my voice was heard, and my presence was celebrated rather than tolerated. In the end, that recognition had changed everything. Not just my career or my relationships, but my understanding of my own worth. And that, perhaps, was the most transformative victory of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't. Want to pass these up? Just click and check them out.